let's talk about film. North America, our first region, and we have 4 film options for you to check out. Remember, choose one and go from there. So the first one, and I organized this by lists from newest to oldest film. You can pick whichever one you please, and I may even offer some recommendations based on that. But the first one is The Post. And The Post is a 2017 film. It's about 2 hours long, rated PG-13. It features Meryl Streep, Tom Hanks, Bradley Whitford from The West Wing, if you like political drama shows from the 1990s, which I do, Bob Odenkirk from Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad, and more. So the film was nominated for Best Picture at the Academy Awards, and Meryl Streep was nominated for Best Actress. Didn't win, but nevertheless to be nominated is still something. Steven Spielberg produced and rather directs the film. So what this film is about is, think early 1970s, the Washington Post, based out of Washington, D.C., a newspaper, is trying to get started. There's a public option going on, and Kay Graham gets this newspaper after her husband, Phil, commits suicide. It was left from her father to her husband, and then from her husband to her. And so we have an executive editor, Ben Bradley, played by Tom Hanks, and publisher Kay Graham, played by Meryl Streep. And there's an injunction to stop the release of classified documents from the New York Times from the Nixon administration. And these are what we now know as the Pentagon Papers. And this is information that was produced from a study, Robert McNamara, Secretary of Defense at the time, about misleading and documents that sort of showcase how the United States pitched and discussed the war in Vietnam at the time. And so this is the publish is 1971, and so this film is set in that time period. So if you know any of that interests you, whether personally or for the class, go ahead and take a look at that film. Next one, 2016, another 2-hour film, Hidden Figures. This one's rated PG. It stars Taraji P. Henderson, Octavia Spencer, Janelle Monáe, Kevin Costner, Mahershala Ali, Jim Parsons from Big Bang Theory, and a star-studded cast. Again, nominated for Best Picture in that year, supporting actress for Henderson, and Theodore Melfi directs. It's set present day in the movie is Hampton, Virginia, where they work out of what's now today is NASA, Langley, Virginia area, in the 1960s. And so 3 women. We have Octavia Spencer plays Dorothy Vaughan. She goes on to become the first African-American supervisor based on her computer programming skills with IBM and the like in the 1960s. We have Mary Jackson, who becomes the first African-American woman female engineer at NASA, and today a NASA facility is named after her, which just happened recently. And then we have Katherine Johnson, who is a human computer who helps work on John Glenn's mission. And again, these women don't get credit, hence the hidden part of the film. And so the film showcases what women had actually contributed to NASA far beyond what we think of today. Janelle Monáe, again, Octavia Spencer, Taraji P. Henderson play these 3 women. They break barriers. This is a time of civil rights. And again, a lot of things going on in the film. One notable thing, Katherine Johnson, she was the last remaining woman of the 3 that was alive. She passed away this past year in 2020 at the age of 101 years old. The next movie is Selma, again, 2 hours, PG-13. It stars David Oyelowo, Oprah Winfrey, Common, and more. Ava DuVernay directs the film. It was nominated for Best Picture, so you can see a theme here. I'm trying to give you movies that not just I think are good, but obviously are regarded to a notoriety and to public acclaim. It ends up winning an award at the Academy Awards for Best Achievement in Music written for a motion picture. It won. This was Common and John Legend, who wrote a song for the film. The film was set in 1965 in Selma, Alabama. So Governor George Wallace, he goes on to, unfortunately, be governor of Alabama for 4 terms, and he was described by Martin Luther King Jr. as one of the most dangerous segregationists of the time. So Civil Rights Act is passed in 1964, desegregating the United States, mostly the South, of course. That doesn't really happen completely, though. And so what folks are fighting for in this film is to completely get rid of Jim Crow laws and increase access to voting. So Martin Luther King Jr. is seen in the film at the beginning accepting an award for a Nobel Peace Prize, and then he approaches President Lyndon B. Johnson for greater access to voting, which eventually leads to the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which is passed after the big fight that's set from marches and demonstrations in Selma, Alabama, and a march from Selma to Birmingham, which we see in the film. There's other things that take effect in the film that are majorly important, like the murder of Jimmy Robinson and the assault of Sheriff Clark by Annie Cooper during a peaceful protest, which was played by Oprah Winfrey. And so again, a great movie that allows us to gain access and perspective into the civil rights movement and some of the same kinds of themes that we're unfortunately still needing to overcome in society today. Last one for North America, your choice, a little bit shorter, an hour and 40 minutes, Charlie Wilson's War, 2007. It's rated R. It stars Tom Hanks again, Julia Roberts, Philip Seymour Hoffman, and more. Mike Nichols directs. It was nominated for a Best Supporting Actor with Philip Seymour Hoffman. And this film, again, based on a true story, like all of these to this point, stars the real life Congressman Charles Wilson, or Charlie Wilson, of the 2nd Congressional District in Texas. He was a Democrat at the time. He was served 12 terms from 1973 to 1997. The man died in 2010. And what we see is a congressman that certainly is laden with scandal based on drug use, alcoholism, sexualization of women, all kinds of things that was maybe okay more at the time, but definitely would be a big deal today for sure. And what we see is him transforming the United States' involvement in Afghanistan during the Cold War. So we see a covert operation. He's on the right kinds of committees in Congress at this time, and he helps increase funding. Again, it's covertly through a socialite played by Julia Roberts. And so they continue to raise money and allocate money through Congress, which was hidden, which eventually took it from a $5 million budget to a $1 billion budget. And so this is, again, through money being raised, arm twisting in Congress, and money being matched by Middle Eastern countries at the time, such as the Saudis. And so this helped it helped defeat the Soviets during the Cold War, especially from the perspective of sort of wearing them down. We can think the Soviets were there for about a decade in Afghanistan, eventually took so many resources and so many deaths of the troops that they had to get out, and eventually the Soviet Union crumbles. But what we did as a country was armed the Mujahideen, the Afghanis who fought against the Soviets there. And we did this through arms deals with other Middle Eastern countries such as Israel and others. We needed the cooperation of the Pakistanis. And so it's a great film. I probably would recommend this one. It's one that a lot of people don't happen to know about or catch unless I make you watch it. So go ahead and maybe take a look at that one. So now we have Middle and South America. And we have, again, 4 films to take a look at in this section. The first one, now all of these are a bit older comparatively to North America. So a 2-hour film called No. This one is rated R. It stars Gael Garcia Bernal, Paloma Moreno, and Richard Dreyfuss. This film is from Chile, and it takes place there. 1988 Chilean elections. So for a bit of context for the film, which you will get out of it, is in 1973, Augusto Pinochet takes over Chile in a coup d'etat, and he rules there with absolute power. And in 1988, there's an agreed upon an election for 8 more years of Pinochet, which is a yes vote. So this is a referendum, or a no vote, which is no more Pinochet and an acceptance of democracy. Eventually, not to spoil it, but the no vote wins with approximately 55% of the vote. And the whole point of the movie is the character Gael Garcia Bernal, the character he plays is a marketing executive who's tapped to help lead the opposition through advertising creatively. And so this helps bring democracy and an end to absolute rule in Chile. It was Chile's submission for the Academy Award that year in 2012. However, it was not nominated. So go ahead and take a look at that film if something like that interests you. The next one, Bananas, in 2009. It is a Swedish documentary. It's only an hour and 20-minute film, so a lot of people choose it based on the runtime. But this is a true story. All of these are based on a true story to this point. About 12 Nicaraguan banana workers in Chinandega, Nicaragua, and the case of sterility being caused by chemicals that are used in banana plantations there. So what we see here is Juan Dominguez out of Los Angeles as an attorney. He takes on David DiLorenzo, the CEO and higher up of Dole, which formerly known as Standard Fruit Company, now known as Dole Food. And they win, and later the case is appealed, and so sort of we reach a high and we have justice for these workers who have become sterile and got cancer from these chemicals. And then later the case is appealed, and friction and court cases can kind of ensue between Juan Dominguez and Dole Food Company. So it helps showcase a little bit of the history of banana production in Costa Rica, mainly Nicaragua, because that's where the film is set. And this is taking place for 60 years. Kind of comes to a point, this is the first time ever that foreign agricultural workers are able to be heard in U.S. court, the U.S. Company being taken on. So again, a great film. Remember, this is Bananas, ! I say that because there's a film, Bananas, from 1971, a Woody Allen film, and you'll be greatly messed up for the quiz if you don't pay attention to that. So get that straight. Next one, 2004 film, 2-hour movie, Motorcycle Diaries. I think this one's pretty interesting. I actually haven't seen it myself until about a year ago. Again, it stars Gael Garcia Bernal and Rodrigo de la Serna, but if you remember the name Bernal, it's because he's the lead in No, so we have him again, just like Tom Hanks, some of these recurring actors. So it won an Academy Award for Best Achievement in Music, written for a motion picture, again with, this was Jorge Drexler, just like Common and John Legend won for Selma. So this is a film from Argentina, and again, based on true events, because the main character is Ernesto Che Guevara, and you probably heard of him, a famous revolutionary figure the 1950s onward in Latin America. And he rides around South America with his friend, played by Rodrigo de la Serna, and they ride around. This is his last year of med school, and they ride around for his friend's 30th birthday. They go all through South America, and they get to see the lives and the people, and they're touched by that. And he gets to practice a bit of his medicine and some of his political ideologies. His medical specialty was leprosy, and so he goes and he breaks barriers and he talks with people, and he talks about a pan-Americanism through there, and a bit of solidarity. And he's very moved by the poverty, the inequality throughout South America, Latin America. And so you begin to see sort of the formative years of Che Guevara and go on to see the rest of the life that he lives. So it's a very interesting movie, again, based on true events. I would recommend it as well. The last one, a 2-hour film out of Brazil. This one's rated R. It stars Leandro Firmino, Alice Braga, and Alexandre Rodriguez, and more. This one receives 4 nominations at the Academy Awards. Again, it's a film from Brazil. It's set in the 1970s in a poverty-stricken favela. It's a Brazilian slum in Rio de Janeiro, and it shows the use of children and, or at least at the end, but definitely just drug-related crime, turf wars. I personally don't care so much for this film because of the violence. There is quite a bit. I once had a student who would count how many people get murdered in the film, so it's a high number. I don't remember, but it's an interesting film. Again, based on true events. An older film, 2002, even older, based on the years that it was set in. But it does take us into the lives, everyday life for some people in poverty-stricken slums in a famous and well-known large city in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. So that wraps up. I tried to keep it succinct, tried to paint you a picture of what the films would be, and maybe it would help with your selection, but those are your choices. Again, 1 film per region, 2 films total. I hope you enjoy them. The point was not to torture you or to cause you any anxiety or harm by causing you to watch these movies, but I think they do an excellent job, all of them, of helping contextualize the material that we're going to be reading through our lecture slides and through our textbooks. So again, go ahead, watch those movies, and use the discussion board to vent or prop up or however you'd like to discuss the films.